Today is our session number 7. We're going to do safety planning in a virtual setting, and also we will hear a great presentation, case presentation from Jennifer. Thank you for doing that. So again, just some reminder, you are muted throughout the echo session, and please do when you need to speak through chat or raise your hand to prompt the facilitator when you need to speak. And when we have discussions, please feel free to unmute yourself and chime in. If you're logged in today's session with another identifier, you can change your name by hovering over your participant video name box and clicking on the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner and choosing rename to change to your first and last name so we can know who you are. And today's presentations are going to be presented by, maybe we can just start introducing ourselves here. So my name is Alice Zhang, and I am a postdoctoral fellow with the Leni program.
And I'm Leni Swails. I'm a psychologist with the Lens program and Telehealth Rocks.
I'm Skylar Bellinger, a psychologist with the same groups. Not presenting today, but good morning.
And I am Katie Tepper, and I'm a psychology postdoctoral fellow with the same group.
Awesome. So just reminding some of the information that the information and recommendations involving clinical medicine is based on evidence that is currently accepted within the profession. And the objectives today, including we want to do a check-in and really have a discussion of COVID-19 in your communities and what you have been doing, what has been very successful. And also we will have case presentation and a safety planning didactics. So the agenda here is that we want to do an introduction first. Again, so we can know who is on the call and where you are from. And then we're going to do the group check-in and then case presentation. And Jennifer, please use as much time as you need. And then we can do a safety planning review. Leni?
So let's go around and start with introductions. So if everyone would mind just to say their name and their location, I'll call you out when it's your turn to introduce yourself. I think we have a little bit smaller group today, but that will just mean we have more time for discussion, so that's fine. Michelle, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'm Michelle, and I am program manager for Telehealth Rocks.
Thanks. Jennifer, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Jennifer Elson. I'm a K-6 elementary counselor in Ellis, Kansas.
Morning. Thanks, Jennifer. Polly, do you want to go next?
Polly Freeman, and I'm with the University of Kansas School of Medicine in Wichita, and we have a HRSA funded grant called KS Kids Map, and we're getting ready to roll out our ECHO in a couple weeks.
Oh, great. Thanks, Polly. We're excited to see that ECHO. That'll be cool. Robert, do you want to say good morning?
Sure, I'm Robert Stiles. I'm in Kansas City at KMed with these guys, and I'm a program manager with Telehealth Rocks.
Great. Beth, I see that you're the next one on my screen.
Yes, I'm Beth Blubaugh, and I'm a clinical marriage and family therapist, and I work with Pretty Prairie and Haven School Districts here near Haven, Kansas.
Great, thanks, Beth. And the last one I see on my screen is Hannah Adams.
Hi, can you hear me?
We had trouble hearing you, but I know Hannah. So Hannah's a research assistant with our group at KU Med. So glad you were able to join us this morning, Hannah. Thanks.
So sounds like that's everyone.
Yeah. So this has been kind of our theme for all of our talking about COVID related to ECHO. It's the idea that anything that's human is mentionable and anything that's mentionable can be more manageable. If we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scaring. So that's kind of our, Skylar pointed this quote out to us, and I like it because I feel like it's kind of become our mantra, which is There's no sense in kind of ignoring it and talking about some other things right now. We need to just kind of acknowledge that this is stressful, but we can talk about it and make it better. So let's go on to the next. So I think we wanted to start first with just kind of checking in. I'm always really interested to see kind of how different districts are coping, you know, how things have progressed over the last 2 weeks with your virtual schooling. Okay, Beth, it looks like Beth's internet's going wonky and telling us that we're unstable. So Beth, the one thing that can also help is if you click on that mute button on the left side and you call in with your phone as opposed to using the audio through your computer. That can help because at least you can hear even if your video goes a little wonky. So that's something that I do when my connection's not being good. But anyway, I think we were going to try to check in with people and just hear kind of how things have been going in your districts, what strategies you've tried so far. And I'm curious too about things that have worked really well or lessons learned or things that haven't worked as well. And maybe we can start by kind of hearing from some of the educators on the call, but since we also have a small group of educators, I'd also be curious to hear from our clinicians on the call too about things that have worked and gone as well as we've been kind of implementing our own clinical practice and transitioning that to telemedicine. Jennifer, I wasn't sure if you wanted to start and kind of tell us a little bit about how things are going in your district.
Sure. We are a kind of a smaller district in Western Kansas. We have like 155 students in our elementary school K-6, and our kindergarten through 3rd grade are self-contained, but our 4th, 5th, and 6th grades are compartmentalized. So we had to kind of adjust our plan a little bit differently for those 2 areas. The self-contained teachers are really happy with what's going on, got through the technical issues, but the kids had been using, we're using the learning platform of Seesaw, and our students had used it a lot in class already, so they were very familiar with it. Parents were a little apprehensive, but the kids showed them how to do it. And then our 4, 5, 6 teachers were trying to figure out a way to make it less confusing for their kids. So instead of having the lessons come to them as in like, this is your social studies lesson and this is your math lesson, they did it, this is your Monday lesson, your Tuesday lesson. And the fall down that they didn't think about is then they get the notifications on everyone. So they were getting like 400 notifications a day on stuff being turned in and commented on. So we figured that out so that their phone isn't constantly going off. Like I said, my lessons, what I've been doing for my guidance lessons is I record them and then I send them to the teachers and they upload them through the Seesaw, and then the kids do their responses and send them back. So far, it's a learning curve. We only just started this week. So we had 4 days worth of figuring this stuff out. We piggybacked off watching what a bunch of the rest of the state did the week before so that we could try to not make some of the same mistakes, but we made some of our own mistakes. But we're learning and everybody's showing each other a lot of grace, and that's kind of what we got to keep focused on, excuse me.
Thanks, Jennifer. That sounds like really helpful lessons learned from you guys as well as some things that have been really successful, which is like kids being able to show their parents like, hey, we can handle this. We know how to do this. I like too that you said everyone's kind of giving everyone a lot of grace. Do you feel like the parents have been pretty understanding of that too? Or have you been getting a lot of stress from them?
I think that we're lucky enough, like I said, being a smaller district, that our parents have had a lot of contact with the teachers already, because with using Seesaw, they've been getting constant conversations back and forth already all year with what the kids have been doing in class. So it wasn't a huge transition. But yeah, the parents have been kind of stressed and they've reached out to the teachers. I've had parents that have reached out to me as well to do some like one-on-one talking them through things. But I think, yeah, our parents stressed out a little bit more than our kids. I think the kids are more adaptable. They're used to everything being new anyway. So this wasn't a huge shock for them, whereas the parents are used to things being done a certain way, and this isn't what we do, so they've had a harder transition.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can totally see that, because I also think parents might be more big picture worriers when they're thinking about what does this mean for my child's education and stuff like that, whereas kids are like, all right, I guess I'm working on Seesaw now, and maybe a little bit more flexible with that.
And that was one of the things that it has come up, that we have parents that are worried that their kids are going to fall behind. But we've had to kind of, you know, alleviate that concern, letting them know everybody is in the exact same situation. So it's not like someone's going to be springing far ahead. Everybody is learning the same way. So our gap isn't going to like extend, because we aren't all doing anything different than each other. So everyone's learning the same way.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jennifer. That's really helpful to kind of hear about. Wasn't sure if any of the other, Beth gave us some info in the chat box. So it sounds like her districts are doing okay. They've been using online like Zoom, Seesaw, and Summit, as well as hard paper options. Teachers have been sending videos and assignments and having Zoom meetings once a week. And the therapists and case managers are seeing kids via Zoom and phone. And that she and along with other 3 counselors have made a link for the district website for resources information, as well as having a contact us form. Oh, I like that. For each building, so families and students can reach out and notice us at any time if they want to chat. I like the idea of having that way. Sometimes it's so hard when you're doing stuff online to figure out, how do I just get a person, or how do I get someone to help me out and answer my questions? So I love that idea of having that be really easy and readily accessible. Wasn't sure if Stephanie, and you're joining forces so we're not overwhelming families. Yeah, I know. I sometimes feel like we're giving so many resources. Sometimes I'm not sure if I'm overwhelming people. Stephanie, I wasn't sure if you wanted to kind of update us on how things are going in your district and what strategies you guys have tried so far.
Sure. This will be our, we're starting our 3rd week, I think, of online instruction. As far as, I don't personally deliver instruction online, but from talking to my teachers, I think most of them are doing well. They're figuring out how to do social skills, how to do all that kind of thing online. And we have a couple of students that are struggling behaviorally, but we've noticed a lot of other students, especially our kids with a lot of anxiety, are doing better at home because they don't have that anxiety being in a large group, which is kind of interesting. It's making us as a district think about maybe we can offer some more options for that once things return to normal, to better work with those students and reduce some of their anxiety. I'm also taking the opportunity, since so many things are free, of looking at some of the online resources like Teach Town, that kind of thing, and experimenting with them to decide if that's something we want to pursue in the future. I think that's pretty much how it's going. Most people feel pretty positive about it, I think, in general. Once they've figured out how to do some things, you know, gotten over the learning curve as adults, we seem to be plugging along well.
That's really interesting, Stephanie, that you say that about the anxiety, because I was just going to pipe in and say that I've had several patients this week that seem to be, you know, doing very well in this setting because they have a lot of social anxiety and a lot of things are triggered by, you know, the anxiety related to school. I'm thrilled for them right now, but I'm terrified for them like in the future. And so, you know, as psychologists and therapists, it's kind of the opposite of what we always recommend, is letting kids withdraw from things they're anxious about, because, you know, then it's like that, then it gets scarier and the anxiety gets more and more and more. And is it going to be just so much worse when they jump back in? So I kind of have some of the same thoughts as you, is like, you know, how can we make it more supportive for them and less anxious for them all the time, but also how do we continue to, you know, teach them they can be brave and teach them to overcome that anxiety, because we don't want kids that are afraid to go anywhere when they're, you know, as they grow up. And so it's very interesting that you say that, because you would think a lot of these kids with anxiety would almost be doing worse with all this stuff going on in the world, but it seems like so many of them are just doing a lot better because they're at home in their comfort zone, and they're not having to face like all of those things that are stressful to them. And so I think that's a really interesting thing to talk about. Just an interesting, I'm not sure what the answer is, but I I've been struggling internally with it because I'm so happy for them, but I'm also so worried about when they have to face some of those situations in the future.
One thing
the same way
that though is just that, you know, we're always thinking, okay, the whole point is to prepare them for being adults, right? And once you're an adult, a lot of times you can choose to work at home or work in a small setting and so forth. So, you know, it just made me think philosophically, okay, how much are we working on trying to get them to fit into our school thing, which is a fairly artificial environment, is a limited time duration, versus looking at, okay, what are their plans, what are their wants for when they're an adult, and then gearing our instruction towards them. Like the students I'm thinking of particularly tend to be about middle school age and so forth. But yeah, you don't want them to be limited also and not be able to pursue something that they want to do because they're scared of the number of people. So I agree, it's not an easy answer, but
I think that is a good point. I mean, you know, school is a very unique situation that is not totally representative of the rest of your life, you know, with the amount of people that are always around you and the demands for performing, you know, right in front of people all day long. And yeah, I don't know. It's really an interesting discussion, I think.
So I just want to ask, oh, sorry. Do I need to move on?
Go for it, Alice.
Oh, so I was just curious about what school has been doing, because you know, obviously there are kids who are like, you know, doing quite well without a lot of the social connections or things that a large group happen at school. But I also heard kids who like really miss their friends and feel like they are not having the opportunity to connect. So I'm just really curious about like other, like, because Stephanie, you mentioned about social skills and things like that. Are there some kind of virtual group or social connection that is like, you know, available for the kids as well?
Our teachers have been using Kahoot for like doing, it's a quiz game that the teacher can put in the questions, and having the kids get together, and it's strictly just a for fun thing, so that the students have a chance to interact with each other in kind of a supervised setting.
Yeah, that's a great idea, to have fun games and but for social purpose.
I just wanted to kind of add on to that anxiety discussion real quick. I think I was having an interesting session for myself yesterday with a new patient I had never met before, who is a 6-year-old, who has a long history of oppositional behavior and anxiety, school refusal, like refusing to leave the house to go to school, and then also a lot of anxiety at school once he got there for doing anything that involved talking in front of the class. So there's like a lot of pieces there, right, of things that could be going better or worse for him right now. And he's doing a lot better in some areas, like not having to do class presentations is making him a lot happier, and he's having less work refusal with his mom at home during the day related to his virtual school activities. So that's kind of an interesting thing, kind of like what you're talking about, Stephanie, of like, okay, well, how can I use this information to help him subsequently when he enters back into school? But on the other hand, with the school refusal piece, I mean, that's going better because there's no school for him to have to leave the apartment to go to. And that's the piece where, like Skylar, I'm really worried about kind of our eventual reentry plan. And that might be something that we'd be kind of all thinking about longer term is it might be more of like, you know, if you've had a kid who's been out of school for a long time, like I used to work at a hospital that did pediatric cancer treatment. So that's where my brain goes. And we wouldn't necessarily plan like, okay, well, this academic year you were out entirely, and next year now you're there 100% of the time. That wasn't a realistic plan to try to encourage someone to re-enter. And especially for our kids with a history of school refusal and anxiety, we might need to be thinking about it the same way of having a re-entry plan, even if it's over the summer driving by the school once a day, once it's safe to go on the playgrounds, going and playing at the school playground every day, eventually even maybe doing their virtual school academic activities at home, and then going to school for more of the social aspects before doing a full reentry plan. Just thinking about, we know that the practice is what helps make perfect when it comes to anxiety. So how do we do that in a supportive way? And also recognize that there's some aspects of anxiety we might be able to accommodate, like anxiety about talking in front of a big group, because maybe you wouldn't choose a job that made you do that. But you do have to leave your house every day and go to school. That's a reasonable expectation. So it's kind of trying to find that balance there.
I have a patient with pretty significant social anxiety, and I just kind of pointing out, he also is struggling with anxiety surrounding the Zoom calls. I mean, he's also in preschool, which is, I think, funny to expect them to do Zoom, but I mean, he really struggled to, you know, he gets really anxious and worked up before they happen. And so his teacher made him a social story about Zoom, and mom thinks he even gets overwhelmed seeing all the faces and like seeing his own face on the screen. And so they've worked on like, maybe they could, you know, turn off the camera so he doesn't have to see himself. They can pin certain people's faces who are talking so he doesn't have to see all the faces. The other thing is we had been planning a transition item that he would bring to school every day. So he loves nature. And so he'd go out and he'd pick like a flower or a leaf or something and bring it to the teacher to show them every morning. And so she kind of found that he still needs that. So she still had him go out and get something from nature in the morning and show his whole class that on Zoom. And that seemed to really help. So I thought it was interesting because you think, oh, the anxiety is gone in this situation, but it's not necessarily. And some of the same strategies that he might have needed in person, he still needs. So I thought that was interesting that she kind of found that he still needed that transition item and that transition support. So
that's interesting. And I can also relate, right? Like we were talking before we all started the call of like, what's my background look like, right? And that's the same kind of public speaking anxiety we all have in person too. It's like, do my pants look okay? You know? And I think we can all kind of understand that and relate to it. So great discussion, guys. Thank you. Let's go on to the next slide.
Yeah.
I'm always, when Alice and I are planning slides, I'm always coming up with like colloquialisms that I want her to include. And so this week I was thinking a lot about the idea of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So when we're thinking about safety planning, it's important first to be thinking about all the things we've been talking about throughout our ECHO series, right? Of all the things we could be doing to prevent the need for crisis planning or safety planning in the first place. And go ahead and progress to the next slide. Dr. Bellinger and some other people from the Telehealth Rocks team made this really awesome family support plan, and this is kind of part of that prevention. So the idea of we'd like to avoid needing to use a crisis plan. And so these are some things that you might be able to work on with a family, especially at the start of treatment, or if you have a family that you know is at high risk as they're doing their virtual schooling, it might be worthwhile to either have them kind of think about some of these things and then consult with you, or kind of create and fill some of these things in together. So the idea of things like enhancing your daily coping with healthy routines, identifying things that are already working for you with your daily coping skills and making sure that we're thinking about that planfully. Recognizing warning signs or triggers in the child so that we know, hey, we need to be on alert to try to do something different here. And then specific coping skills to use once those warning signs or triggers are observed. And then if we're having to kind of escalate even further of, okay, who can we call for support if we really need it in an emergency? Someone who can listen, someone who can help with meals, errands, transportation, etc. So social distancing is really important. We do want to do as much as we can to flatten the curve. But it also says that there's an emergency, absolutely, please do reach out for help. So don't feel like you have to manage an emergency by yourself, and the same goes for families too. And then also thinking about community resources. So you can always know in the back of your brain that, yeah, I can call the crisis line at my community mental health center if I need to. But if you don't have that phone number written down in an easily accessible place, then it's going to seem much, much harder to do in the middle of a crisis, right? So thinking in advance, doing a kind of working on that prevention piece, and hopefully if you write all this stuff down and you come up with all those phone numbers, hopefully you'll never need it. But it's much better to think about in advance rather than be in a crisis situation and not have the stuff that you need. Skylar, please add in, this is your document.
Yeah, no, I just used it yesterday, and it went really well. I was a little nervous because this mom was a little defensive, and I was afraid she was going to be kind of offended because she really needed it. She got very escalated in our last session. And so she was still a little bit kind of defensive, but she really took to it. And, even talking about the healthy routines really helped identify that she really doesn't feel like she's getting enough sleep, and that she doesn't feel like there's a way to get enough sleep. And so she works at night and doesn't get home till late. And then the little girl wants to wake up really early. And so we really kind of had to problem solve that. I don't know if we found a good solution, but I think it helped her to even just understand like that's already escalating her, like they're already sort of at this kind of higher baseline because she's tired. And it's okay to say that, and it's okay to ask for help. And like, how do we put something in place where maybe she will stay in her room a little later in the morning, or, you know, something like that. And so I thought that was really good. You know, again, she was kind of, again, saying, well, I don't have time for myself. I don't have time to do this. But when we got into it, she was really willing to kind of say, yeah, just taking a couple deep breaths and reminding myself she's not doing this on purpose, and kind of having some of that positive self-talk, that we're doing the best we can. So I was impressed that, you know, she was even being a little defensive at first. I think it really helped her kind of think through, you know, what was actually happening, and just be more thoughtful and planful about that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Skylar. So if you want to progress, there you go.
Yeah. So also, that another piece is the sample crisis safety plan that also Dr. Bellinger and some of the colleagues have created. And so it really talks about different behaviors, like, you know, children may tend to display both at school and at home. So this version is more geared towards how we can handle those behaviors and prepare having a safety plan for those behaviors at home. We're gonna talk about those like in detail.
Yes, we can share these with other providers. I think they're all on the Telehealth Rocks website, right, Skylar? Okay. Yeah, so yes, please do, Polly. Yeah, download them from there, because we're really excited about being able to share these resources with other people. So thinking about kind of building on the safety practices that you already have for on-site clinics. Also, just remembering in general, talking with family about confidentiality and its limits, documenting everything that you're doing. So that way it can help you remember for future sessions what you've covered and what you haven't. And then also, you know, always unfortunately having to think about the possibility of your documents being read in court. And so want to make sure that you've done everything you can to make sure you feel confident if that were ever to happen. Also good to identify a family callback number at the beginning of any kind of sessions that you might be doing in case they do get disconnected. So especially if I'm worried about like a higher risk family or one that's new to me, might start the session off with, hey, just in case anything happens with technology, what's the best number for me to call you at? And then also making sure we're aware of any local emergency service contact ahead of time too. And then if your video stops and you're worried about safety or overall health emergencies, call that backup number. And if you can't call the family, then you can call emergency services. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to cover here.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about the behaviors. So the first one that we want to talk about is eloping. So basically kids trying to run out of the area that you want them to stay, or maybe you are having them do an activity, maybe that's doing their homework or like listening to their online instructions, and they try to run away from that area. So it is really important because of the potential safety concern that when they run out of their home, particularly, is trying to maybe make sure that when they are in the area, lock the doors, so that, like, this is a picture that apparently the kid can really open the door, and so that's really not working. So making sure that there are some other tools that maybe you can add to another lock that's on top of the regular lock that you use, so that the child cannot reach it. And also there might be other safety devices that you can buy online that can help further secure that door as well. And I know also there's something like, you know, because I work with children with autism, sometimes the children, they have concerns with them just wandering out of their home. So I always recommend, you know, in addition to locks and things like that, maybe there are alarms that you can use to make sure that you can definitely hear when they try to open the door or they try to leave the door. So, but if elope or running off like really happens, making sure that, you know, you calmly follow the child to ensure safety, and you block access to other doors and dangerous items. So if there are, like, you know, heavy stuff and knives and things like that, try to make sure you remove those things so the child does not have access. And also calmly guide the child back to the room. And again, that's kind of the family plan, family safety plan information can be really helpful here, because if you really cannot handle yourself, it is okay for parents to call for additional family or neighbor support. And obviously the last resort, or sometimes maybe the best resort, is call or contact local emergency services. For example, if the child already runs off, or maybe the child is, you know, it's not a small child that you can now safely handle. Another behavior is aggression. So some of the strategies certainly will be similar. I think across the board, the message is that it is really important for parents or caregivers to be calm. So, and try not to have a lot of emotions or that shown through your facial expressions or your voice, because that potentially can also first give attention to that behavior, and secondly may accidentally escalate the situation as well. So it is really, although it's hard, but it is really important to be calm. So when there is aggression happens, making sure that you are calmly block the aggression. So if the aggression happens to someone else, for example, to siblings at home, making sure that, you know, that sibling is safe, and try to block that aggression, and also checking on the sibling who was being, you know, aggressed towards to. So saying, are you okay? So, and really just putting all the attention on that child instead of, you know, saying, why are you doing this? Stop it. So that we are not giving that attention to the child who is being aggressive. Instead, this is a good way to teach the child as well that you're not going to getting any attention from this behavior. Again, also making sure that you block access to dangerous items, particularly in the scenario of aggressions, making sure that the child doesn't have access to anything that can be sharp or that thing heavy that he or she can throw at people. And also, if possible, get the child to a safe place. So maybe try to, if you have a room that is, there's not a lot of things in, there are a lot of things in there, it might be a good space for the child to stay and try to calm down, without the concern for like further aggression, because of you have a lot of things around, the child can potentially just grab and throw. Also really important to give the child time to calm down, and sometimes that may take a long time, and it's okay for you to just, you know, maybe not lock the door but shut the door, and while you stand behind outside of the door, keeping an eye on the child, making sure the child is not further harming him or herself, but at the same time making sure you're not constantly giving attention to that behavior while the child is calming down. Also, if you're really having a hard time to manage the behavior and it really escalates to the degree that you have a hard time controlling that behavior, contact emergency services.
So self-harm, I actually had 2 of the kids I was seeing yesterday for therapy were engaging in self-harm behavior during the call, during our session. So this is fresh on my brain. So the first thing is to assess the severity of the self-harm behavior. So the first kid I was seeing who was doing this, it was in the context of a tantrum. He was upset that he wasn't getting tablet time and he wanted chips for breakfast. And so we were coaching the mom to ignore him grabbing at her shirt and things like that in the context of this tantrum. And then he kind of switched to scratching himself. And that was very distressing for mom. So I had her kind of assess the severity of the self-harm. It wasn't breaking skin. It wasn't even really leaving significant marks on himself. So in that case, we were able to ignore that behavior, and just providing that reassurance for mom, I think, was a relief for her to know that she's not doing anything wrong by ignoring this behavior. That's the appropriate and good parenting choice to make. If it had been potentially harmful, then we would have had mom kind of calmly block, you know, whether that's kind of keeping his hands down or blocking his skin in some way so that he wasn't causing himself any aggression, any harm. And then once he stopped scratching on himself and he was just sitting in the chair, even though he was continuing to whine, argue, and complain, we did go ahead and praise the fact that he was having a calm body and he was being kind to himself. And we praised that behavior so that we could notice the pieces of his actions that were important to us, and most important, that he wasn't engaging in that self-harm anymore. And then, rather than having the parent immediately try to go in and get him to eat his cereal again, I said, hey, let's just give him some time to calm down. So we all need, this is just sending us all a cue that he needs a little bit of space. Let's give him time to calm down. And for him, that was enough, giving him 2 or 3 minutes to calm down was enough for him to calm down, and then he started eating his cereal again. So that worked pretty well in that situation. But if verbal or physical threats were continuing, we'd kind of continue with doing some risk assessment. And for a child who is expressing more significant intent or plan to harm themselves in a serious way that could cause significant damage, we would take them to the emergency room, or if there's a local pediatric mental health hospital, that we take them there, or share local crisis management resources. I think ignoring is, unless it's actually harmful, is so hard for parents and teachers. I totally agree. And so I think being able to do it in that moment coaching, if possible, can be really reassuring to say, I'm here, I witnessed it, I am seeing what you're seeing, and you are doing the right thing. I think it's also important to think about self-harm behavior. Sometimes it's more of a repetitive anxiety-related behavior as opposed to in the context of a tantrum. And that was the second child I saw with self-harm yesterday. So for her, she has existing anxiety. COVID has increased that level of anxiety. So she's doing more skin picking that leads to redness and cuts and stuff on her fingers, which is causing her mom, who has pre-existing anxiety, a lot of anxiety because she was worried about the broken skin, increasing her risk for getting COVID, which is a somewhat accurate concern because she has more open areas. So providing a little bit of education for the kid about this is why mommy's worried about you picking at your skin right now, which is because we want you to stay healthy, but also recognizing you're going to be fine. Kids don't get sick. Kids don't get really hurt. We just want you to be a good germ buster and a good community leader. And then for her, it was also about recognizing an alternative behavior. So she was able to say, I want my stuffy, I want to hold my lovey and my stuffed animal now that I'm at home more and I'm feeling more worried. And then so mom was going to redirect her to that whenever she noticed that skin picking behavior. So that's another example of how we kind of addressed it in that context. If you want to proceed to the next slide, thanks. And then if we're worried about a parent being unsafe towards a child, attempt to provide a safer alternative. I love the safety plan that Skylar was going through with that family. Like everyone might need to take a cool off and a break, going to get a drink of water or something. Refer back to that safety contract you've come up with in advance so that so that you can kind of refer back to the things we had all previously agreed on. If we need to stop the session, if we need to kind of reduce some of the demands in the situation because the #1 priority is quality of life and safety, that's a perfectly fine thing to do. And if you're worried about immediate safety, please call 911 just for a safety check. If you can't be there, that's absolutely the right thing to do. Their job is to make sure that everyone's safe and come and check in. And most emergency personnel are good at doing that in a relatively non-threatening way. But you know, your #1 priority is the child's safety. So even if you feel uncomfortable with that, remind yourself you're doing this in the interest of the child, and that's the best thing to do. And like I said last time, I think we all need to be thinking about CPS reports as needed because we know from the data right now that our number of CPS reports is dropping off, which could also be related to the fact that we don't have as many contacts to report things that could be ongoing. I know there's also a lot of concerns about people being stuck at home with domestic abusers, so just being mindful about that and being appropriately cautious when need be. We can progress to the next slide. So I just want to open it up now for any questions or comments or other things that people wanted to problem solve with crisis planning and virtual schooling. Lots of crickets. Well, I really enjoyed our discussion today, guys. And I've also really enjoyed kind of the community we've had with this ECHO throughout the series. I feel like each time I've done it, I've gotten to know you guys a little bit better, and it's helped me kind of better understand like what's going on in your districts, and also just the incredible resources we have in Kansas with all of our school districts here doing just absolutely amazing work. So I just really appreciate you guys coming, participating, and everything you're doing for your students and your families in your district.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo with Leni.
I agree. Thanks, guys. Leni, I think at the last meeting we had talked about maybe sending out a another survey, or just like kind of getting people's feel for, you know, continuing with this. I think we have one more session, but Dr. Nelson mentioned, you know, like, would that be something that people would want to continue, you know, into May and into the summer, like monthly? I don't know. I feel like people are overwhelmed and have a lot of meetings. So we certainly don't want to like add other things to your schedules if that's not helpful. So just be thinking about that. And since not everyone's here today, maybe we'll send it out to kind of the group and see if it's something people would want to continue, just like checking in. I know by summer people might be also sort of checking out of school and trying to have a little bit of a mental break. So I think that's totally fine too. We just wanted to make sure we were sort of serving the needs that you guys had, and you know, continuing to support if that is helpful. So be thinking about that. And hopefully, go ahead.
Yeah, and also as we were talking about re-entry, you know, if there's any interest in starting back up again a month before school would start, so we can be thinking about re-entry plans, I'd be really interested in that conversation too. So we might send out a survey with a couple of different options, fill it out, send it around to other people that you know that have been participating in it too, and love to get your feedback. I'm going to pop out. You guys are welcome to continue if you need to. I have to go to a therapy session for a family, and they need me to start the meeting for some reason. So bye, guys.
Does anybody else need anything else, or are you guys ready to sign off? All right. Okay. Well, thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you for
Have a good weekend. Happy Easter.